I lifted the box lid and my hands went cold. It was empty except for a single pawn ticket. I looked up at my daughter and said, "Then let's see how far you get without me." 20 minutes later, my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, and I didn't raise my voice at all. "My name is Walter, and I'm 58 years old. For 31 years, I told myself that if I gave my daughter Emily every advantage I never had, she'd grow into a woman who understood what things actually cost. I spent those years running heavy equipment on highway crews, waking at 4:30, coming home with diesel under my fingernails no amount of scrubbing could get out. I built a paving and asphalt company out of a single leased roller into a firm that handled county contracts across 3 states. But I never let it show. I kept driving my old Silverado. I kept living in the same 3-bedroom house on Larch Street. To everybody who met me, including my own daughter, I was just a foreman who'd gotten lucky with a small business in a comfortable retirement. I kept it that way on purpose, because I wanted Emily to build her own character instead of leaning on mine. I was about to find out exactly how little character she'd built. It was a warm Saturday in June, and I was driving out to Emily and her husband Derek's place for a Father's Day cookout a week early, since Derek's family had claimed the actual holiday. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in one of those new developments where every lawn looks sprayed on, 3-car garage, stone accents on the front, the kind of place that shows up in a real estate agent's Instagram. I parked on the street, carrying a card and a bag of the good coffee Emily used to like, wearing my usual jeans and a clean flannel. Before I even got to the porch, I felt it start. Derek came out from the side yard in a golf polo tucked into shorts that probably cost more than my first truck. He didn't say hello. His eyes went straight past me to my Silverado at the curb. "Walt," he said, using my first name the way he always did, like Dad was a title I hadn't earned. "Would you mind pulling that around back by the shed? We've got the Hendricksons and some people from my firm coming, and I'd rather they not think we hired somebody for the yard." He laughed like it was a joke. I swallowed it down, same as always, and moved the truck. The backyard had a stone patio, a pergola strung with lights, a smoker Derek had bought that cost more than most people's used cars. Emily was near the drink table in a sundress, laughing with a cluster of women I didn't recognize, holding a glass of white wine like she was posing for something. I heard her before I reached the food. "Derek surprised me with this bracelet for our anniversary," she was saying, turning her wrist so the diamonds caught the light. "He said I deserve something that actually matches the house now." Her friends made the appropriate sounds. I stood there with my bag of coffee, because I knew exactly what that bracelet cost, since I was the one who'd wired the money to the jeweler after Emily called me in tears, saying Derek's commission checks were delayed and she didn't want to disappoint him for their anniversary. I never told her I'd covered it. I never told either of them I owned 40% of the paving company that supplied half of Derek's firm's development projects, either through a holding entity with a name that meant nothing to anyone. For 2 hours, I was furniture. When I tried to join a conversation about a new bypass project going in near the interstate, something I actually knew more about than anyone at that party, Derek cut in and steered me toward the grill. "Walt, you're good with your hands. Why don't you keep an eye on the burgers for us? Let the professionals talk shop." I stood at that grill flipping meat for people who never once asked my name, watching my daughter perform for a crowd of people she'd known for 2 years, while I watched her ignore the man who'd paid for her braces, her car, her wedding, and the down payment on the house whose lawn I was standing on. As the sun started going down, Emily tapped a fork against her glass and called everyone in for toasts. Derek's boss went first, some long speech about ambition and self-made success. Then Emily stood up, glass raised, and looked around at the pergola lights and the stone patio like she was surveying a kingdom. "You know," she said, "growing up, I didn't have a lot. My dad worked construction, and honestly, I spent most of my childhood embarrassed to have people see where we lived. I promised myself I'd build something different." She laughed, a little sharp. "I had to figure out ambition completely on my own, because my father never understood what it meant to want more than just getting by. He was happy with the bare minimum, and I refused to be." The patio went quiet. A couple of the women glanced at me and then quickly looked away. I felt 31 years of overtime shifts and skipped vacations, and a mortgage I paid off early, so she'd never worry about losing the house rise up in my chest all at once. I stepped forward. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice low, "it's getting late. Maybe we save the speeches." She turned toward me, and something ugly crossed her face. something I'd never let myself really look at before. "Don't do this here, Dad," she snapped. "You've held me back my whole life looking at me like I owe you something. I don't. I built this myself. I wish you'd never even bothered showing up." The yard went dead silent. I looked at the girl I used to carry on my shoulders at the county fair, and she was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I didn't yell. I didn't say another word to the crowd. "Then let's see how far you get without me," I said quietly, and I turned and walked off that patio, down the driveway, past my own truck at the curb, and straight to the white Lexus SUV parked in the garage. I pulled the spare fob from my jacket pocket, the one I'd kept since I bought that vehicle outright through my holding company 2 months earlier after Emily called begging for a safe car because her old one had transmission trouble. I climbed in, started the engine, and pulled out of that cul-de-sac. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat before I hit the main road. A text from Emily. "Bring my car back right now or I'm calling the police." I smiled, because the truth she hadn't learned yet was that the car had never been hers. I turned the phone off. I know how these things work, because I've spent 30 years reading contracts nobody bothers to read. 10 minutes later, lights flooded my rearview mirror. I pulled onto the shoulder, put both hands on the wheel, and waited. 2 officers approached, cautious, hands near their belts. "Sir, step out of the vehicle. This car was reported stolen 8 minutes ago." I stayed calm, told them my registration was in the glove box, let them check it themselves. The younger one read it out loud to his partner. "Registered not to Emily or Derek, but to a corporate entity, Larchmont Holdings, LLC." "And your relationship to Larchmont Holdings?" the older officer asked, his tone already shifting. I handed him a business card. "I'm the sole owner," I said. "My daughter drives that car because I let her. I pay the insurance. She's never made a single payment on it." They ran everything, came back apologetic, and told me my daughter had just filed a false police report, which is its own crime. I asked them to follow me back to the party. We pulled back into that cul-de-sac with lights still spinning, cutting red and blue across manicured lawns. The music inside cut off. Guests came out onto the porch holding their drinks, watching. Derek pushed to the front, already performing relief for his coworkers. "Officer, thank you for finding him. My father-in-law had a lot to drink and got confused. He took the car without." The older officer cut him off flatly. "Sir, this vehicle is registered to Larchmont Holdings. The man standing there owns that company. He can't steal his own property. Your wife filed a false report." Emily's face drained of color in front of every person she'd been performing for all night. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word to either of them. I walked past Derek to grab my jacket off a chair, and as I passed, Emily grabbed my sleeve, whispering, "Dad, please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding. You're humiliating me." I looked at her and said, "I'm just a foreman, honey. I don't know anything about your high society misunderstandings. You built this yourself. Fix it yourself." I thanked the officers and drove home in my own truck, leaving the Lexus parked exactly where they'd won, at least right in front of everyone. I woke the next morning to 17 missed calls, most from Emily, a few from Derek, and one voicemail left at 1:40 a.m. I made coffee before I listened to it, because I already knew whatever was on there wasn't going to be an apology. It wasn't. Emily's voice was thick, furious, the kind of angry that comes from being embarrassed in front of people whose opinion mattered more to her than mine. "I can't believe you did that to me. Do you understand what you did? Monica's parents think I'm married to a fraud now. Derek's boss saw the whole thing. You didn't teach me a lesson. You humiliated your own daughter for sport?" Then her tone changed, went colder, more deliberate, and that's when the hair on my arm stood up. "Dad, honestly, we've noticed you've been acting different lately. Forgetful, erratic, taking a car that isn't yours, causing a scene with the police. That's not normal behavior for a man your age. Derek and I have talked to a lawyer. We're looking into what it would take to make sure you're not putting yourself or anyone else at risk. You need someone managing things for you now." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold, staring at the rain starting up outside the window. If she'd called to say she never wanted to speak to me again, I could have lived with that, grieved it, moved on. But she wasn't trying to walk away. She was trying to lock the door behind her with me still inside. A conservatorship isn't a slap on the wrist. It's the legal erasure of a person. It would give Derek control over where I lived, what doctors I saw, how every dollar I'd ever earned got spent. I realized, sitting there, that I wasn't dealing with an ungrateful daughter anymore. I was dealing with two people looking at an old man's assets like a vacant lot they intended to develop. I didn't delete that voicemail. I backed it up in two places. Then I picked up the phone and called a man named Raymond Ortiz, my attorney for 18 years, the one who'd handled every acquisition, every trust, every piece of paper that kept my company's structure invisible to the outside world, including my own family. I'd always kept him far away from Emily, because I wanted her to have a father, not a legal department. That separation was over. Raymond met me at his office within the hour. No questions asked, coffee already made. I played him the voicemail. He listened without interrupting, jaw tightening slightly at the word erratic. When it ended, he asked me what I wanted. I told him I didn't want a defense. I wanted an audit, top to bottom, of everything I'd ever quietly paid for on Emily and Derek's behalf, and I wanted it done before either of them filed a single piece of paper against me. We started with the house. Derek believed he'd secured a favorable mortgage through a private lender 2 years earlier when his credit was too thin for a conventional bank. In reality, my holding company had bought that house outright for cash, and the mortgage he thought he was paying went straight into a trust I'd set up for their future kids. Raymond pulled the deed up on the screen. I told him to prepare a 30-day notice, terminating their tenancy, with the option to sign a market-rate commercial lease at $6,200 a month if they wanted to stay. Next came the credit card. I'd quietly funded a high-limit card Emily believed was a perk tied to Derek's job, clearing the balance every quarter without either of them knowing where the money came from. Raymond scrolled through the last statement. Jewelry stores, a weekend trip to Napa, a day spa charge for nearly $1,000. I told him to freeze it immediately, but not to erase the balance instead. Transfer full liability into their names, exactly as the guarantee agreement they'd signed but never read aloud. That put over $40,000 of debt directly onto their shoulders in the space of an afternoon. Then Raymond went quiet in a different way. He'd pulled up a secondary account, one tied to a small rental property I owned near the lake where my late wife Carol and I used to spend summers before she passed. Someone had submitted an application for a $95,000 home equity loan against that property 4 days earlier, under my name. I hadn't touched that account in years. Raymond zoomed in on the signature. It looked close enough to fool a bank teller in a hurry, but not close enough to fool a man who'd signed his own name 100,000 times. The pen lifted wrong after the W. My daughter, or someone acting for her, had practiced forging my signature until it was good enough to steal from me. Attached to the loan application was a letter on stationery from a clinic 2 towns over, describing an evaluation I'd never had, listing cognitive decline, memory lapses, and inability to manage my own affairs, concluding I required immediate family intervention. The same language from Emily's voicemail, almost word for word. This wasn't anger over one bad night at a cookout. This had been in motion for weeks. Underneath that letter was a durable power of attorney, giving Emily complete control over my finances, my medical decisions, and my property. Forged notary seal, forged signature. Raymond told me what that meant in plain terms: wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, all federal, all carrying real prison time. Then he asked me the hard question. Was I ready to let my daughter face that? I thought about Emily on that patio telling a crowd of strangers I was happy with the bare minimum. I thought about the bracelet I'd paid for while she boasted about her husband's generosity. I told Raymond I didn't want the police called yet. I wanted her to walk into a room believing she'd already won, and I wanted to be the one standing there when she found out she hadn't. Before we set the trap, there was one more thing I needed to check. Carol's things. I still kept a small collection of her jewelry in a safe deposit box downtown. And years ago, back when I still trusted blindly, I'd listed Emily as an emergency contact on the account. I drove to the bank that afternoon. The manager pulled the box for me without hesitation. I opened it and my chest went tight. Empty, except for a folded pawn ticket dated 2.5 weeks earlier. My daughter's signature at the bottom, Carol's wedding ring. Her mother's brooch. Pawned for $22,000, the manager told me, after Emily had come in claiming I was too ill to handle my own affairs and needed the funds released for medical expenses. I didn't go back to Raymond's office right away. I drove straight to the pawn shop on the ticket, on the industrial side of town, and told the man behind the counter those items belonged to me. He didn't want to hand them over without payment, so I paid him every dollar plus his cut and walked out with the only pieces I had left of my wife. Back at Raymond's office, I set the velvet box on his desk next to the pawn ticket. He looked at it, then at me, and didn't ask any more questions. We spent the rest of that afternoon assembling the full picture into folders, black ones, because that's what he had on hand, and I never bothered changing it. I sent Emily a text, playing exactly the part she'd already decided I was. Emily, I'm sorry about the other night. I think you might be right. I haven't been myself. Can we meet at my attorney's office Monday at 10? I want to talk about handing things over properly. Her reply came back in under 2 minutes. Glad you're finally being reasonable. Derek and I will bring our lawyer to make sure it's done right. Monday morning, they walked in like they were arriving to collect a debt that was finally due. Emily wore a blazer I'd never seen, hair done, sunglasses she didn't bother taking off until she sat down. Derek followed with a folder under his arm and a lawyer trailing behind them in a suit that fit a size too small. A man named Pruitt who set his briefcase on the table with the confidence of someone who'd never lost. Walt, Pruitt began, sliding papers across the table. These documents establish a voluntary conservatorship, transferring management of your assets and medical decisions to your daughter. Given your recent behavior, it's really the responsible path forward. Emily didn't even look at me while he talked. She was checking her phone. I didn't reach for the pen. I reached into my briefcase and set 3 folders on the table instead, right on top of their paperwork. I'm not signing anything, I said, but you should read what I brought. I slid the first folder toward Emily. Inside was a repossession notice. The Lexus is being picked up from your driveway right now, I told her. So is the Audi in your garage. They were never yours. You're entirely self-made now, like you told everyone at the party. Might as well start acting like it. Emily's mouth fell open, but Derek jumped in first. Walt, this is insane. You can't just... I slid the second folder to him, inside the eviction notice. You've got 30 days, I said. After that, if you want to stay, it's $6,200 a month, market rate, first and last due on signing. There's no mortgage, Derek. There never was one. I own that house outright. Every check you thought you were sending a bank went straight into a trust for kids you don't have yet. Derek's face went the color of drywall dust. I tapped the third folder, still closed in front of Emily. There's still the matter of the debt. Inside was the credit statement, $41,000, itemized, jewelry stores and spa days circled in red where Raymond had marked them. That's yours now. Both your names as of 9 this morning. Emily's voice cracked. You can't do this. We have a mortgage. We have Dad. This is because of one fight at a party. It's not one fight, I said. It's 31 years. It's standing on a patio and telling strangers, I understood the bare minimum when the bare minimum bought your braces and your wedding and the very ground you were standing on. Derek stood up so fast his chair scraped back, grabbing the forged documents off the table, waving them like a weapon. You're the one who's incompetent, old man. I've got the medical evaluation right here. I'll take you to court myself. I'll take everything. You'll want to hold on to that paperwork, I said quietly. You're going to need to explain it to someone in a few minutes. Raymond, who'd been standing by the window the whole time, reached under the desk and pressed a button. 3 seconds later, the side door opened, and a man in a plain gray jacket with a badge on his belt walked in. A detective from the Financial Crimes Unit who'd been sitting in the next room the entire meeting. Pruitt didn't even try to argue. He grabbed his briefcase and walked straight for the exit, muttering something about withdrawing as counsel effective immediately. Derek watched him go, the forged papers still shaking in his hand. The detective looked at Derek first. You submitted an application for a home equity loan using a forged signature and a fraudulent medical evaluation 4 days ago. That's wire fraud and identity theft at minimum. Then he turned to Emily. And you accessed a safe deposit box under false pretenses and pawned stolen property? That's grand larceny. He held up an evidence bag with the pawn ticket inside. Emily started crying. The kind of crying that isn't about guilt, it's about getting caught. Dad, please, I didn't know what he was planning with the loan. I swear, it was his idea. Derek's head snapped toward her, and I watched 30 seconds of marriage evaporate in real time as they both started talking over each other, each one suddenly a helpless bystander to the other's crimes. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and looked at my daughter one last time. I'm not incompetent, Emily, I said. I'm just done being your safety net. You wanted to build everything yourself. Now you get to. I walked out into the hallway and didn't look back through the glass. Though Raymond told me later that two uniformed officers came in less than a minute after I left, and both of them were in handcuffs by the time they reached the lobby downstairs. Walked past a row of Derek's own coworkers who happened to be in the building for an unrelated meeting. Derek's firm terminated him by the end of that week, no severance, escorted out with his things in a box. Emily's old friends from the country club stopped returning her calls before the week was over. People who love you for your money leave fast once the money's gone. The eviction went through on day 31 exactly. I didn't go watch, but Raymond told me the moving trucks lined the cul-de-sac while neighbors stood on their lawns and watched furniture that never should have been theirs get carried out to the curb. Within 2 months, Emily filed for divorce, tried to tell a lawyer and anyone who'd listen that Derek had hidden his crimes from her, that she was a victim too. That story lasted exactly until the detective matched her signature to the pawn ticket and the security footage from the shop. She was arrested a second time in a rented studio apartment paid for with borrowed money, and this time there was no one left to blame. I didn't go to either of their hearings. I read Raymond's weekly updates and let the rest of it move at its own pace, the way debt and consequence always do once you stop propping them up. The house sold within 10 days to a cash buyer who didn't care what had happened inside its walls. The money went back into the holding company, and from there, into something new. I sat down with Raymond and set up the Carol Bishop Memorial Trade Scholarship, full ride funding for young people going into welding, electrical work, plumbing, the trades Derek used to make jokes about at that cookout. Carol always said a man who works with his hands never runs out of ways to be useful. I liked the idea of her name doing some good in the world neither of them had bothered to understand. I handed the daily operations of the company to my longtime crew supervisor, a woman named Denise, who'd earned it a dozen times over. I kept the house on Larch Street, but I spend most of my time now at a small cabin I bought on a lake 3 hours north. Nothing fancy, a wood stove and a dock, and more quiet than I've had in 3 decades. Fall came in early this year. I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, going lukewarm, watching mist come off the water, when my phone buzzed on the railing. Unknown number, area code I didn't recognize, the kind that comes from a facility phone system. I knew who it was without answering. I let it ring itself out. Then I stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, and dropped the phone into the metal trash can by the steps. It rattled against the bottom and went still. I picked up my fishing rod off the rack, walked down to the dock, and cast my line into water that didn't ask me for anything at all. For the first time since Carol died, the silence around me belonged to nobody but me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't proven by what you're willing to hand over. It's proven by what you're willing to walk away from when the people you love stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a resource. You can spend a lifetime building a safety net for someone, and if they never learn to stand without it, all you've really built is a trap for yourself. I don't regret the years I spent working with my hands so my daughter could have soft ones. I only regret not teaching her that soft hands still have to earn what they hold. If you've ever had to set a boundary with your own child, even when it broke your heart to do it, I'd like to hear how you got through it, because I think a lot of us are carrying that same quiet weight, and it helps to know we're not carrying it alone.